The sun was high in the sky, burning everything in its path. The air was dry, the kind that made people feel thirsty even when they were not. Across the road from a large mansion, an old woman sat under a small tree, watching the black iron gates as though she was expecting something. Her clothes were old, her wrapper tied tightly around her thin waist. Her face was lined with wrinkles, her hands rough with age. She had been sitting there for hours, just as she had been doing every day for the past 3 years. Nobody knew where she came from, and nobody cared to ask anymore. She was simply there, a part of the street, like the beggars at the market, or the hawkers selling ground, not by the roadside. The security men at the gate had seen her so many times that they no longer paid her any attention. At first, they had tried to chase her away. They shouted at her, poured water on her, even threatened her with the police. But she never reacted. She never argued, never fought back. She simply picked up her small bag, moved a few steps away, and sat down again. Over time, they grew tired. She was not harming anyone, and she never asked for food or money. She just sat there waiting. A young maid in chi stepped out of the gate carrying a small bag of trash. As she walked towards the bean, she glanced at the old woman and sighed. It was impossible not to feel sorry for her. She looked so weak, so tired, yet she never left. "Mama, why do you sit here every day?" In asked. The old woman looked up slowly. Her eyes were dull, yet they held something deep, something painful. "I am waiting," she simply said. Inky frowned. "Waiting for who?" The old woman smiled but said nothing. She only turned her eyes back to the gate. Inky sighed and shook her head. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small loaf of bread. "Here, Mama, eat something." She placed the bread beside the woman and hurried back inside the house before the headmaid caught her talking to a stranger. Inside the mansion, life continued as usual. The compound was large with beautiful flowers and well-trimmed grass. Expensive cars lined in the driveway, and the house itself was the kind seen only in magazines. It belonged to Chief Chuki Odoku, a billionaire businessman feared and respected by many. At that point, Chief Odogu was in his study going through some business files. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and sharp eyes. Everything about him spoke of power. He had worked hard for his success and had no patience for distractions. "Sir, the board meeting is scheduled for 3 o'clock, his assistant, Mr. James, informed him. Odogu nodded without looking up. "Make sure everything is ready. I don't want any mistakes." "Yes, sir." Just then, the head security guard, Musa, entered the office and hesitated before speaking. "That old woman is outside again." Odogu's pen paused for a moment, but he did not look up. "What old woman?" "The one that sits by the gate every day." She had been there since morning again. Odogu sighed impatiently. "And so, what do you expect me to do?" Musa scratched his head. "She doesn't ask for anything. All she does is look at this house as though it means something to her. We have chased her so many times, but she has refused to go." Odogu finally looked up, his expression unwaitable. "Ignore her as long as she doesn't cause trouble. Let her be." Musa nodded and left, but as he stepped outside, he could not help but glance towards the gate. The woman was still there, still watching, still waiting. What exactly was she waiting for? As the day passed, more people came and went into the mansion, but the old woman remained. The night came and she was still there. Suddenly it began to rain. She finally picked up her bag and stood up slowly, her joints stiff from sitting too long. With one last look at the gate, she turned and walked away into the night. But everyone knew she would be back tomorrow. She always came back. The sun rose slowly the next morning. Madame Ununis, Chief Odogu's mother, noticed the old woman sitting outside as her driver pulled out of the mansion. She frowned. "Who is that woman?" she asked the driver. "Madame, it is one old woman that has been coming to sit here for days." The driver answered. She does not trouble anybody. Oh, all she does is look at the gates. Madame Eunice's face darkened. She has been here for years. Yes, madame. The girls are even tired of her. Madame Eunice's hands tightened around her purse. Make sure Chief Odoku never hears about her. The driver gave a strange look, but said nothing. The old woman remained outside the gate, her patience never failing. She had come this far, and she would not stop now. No matter how long it took, she would wait, because she knew one thing for sure. One day, the truth would no longer hide behind the walls of that grand mansion. The mansion was alive with movement. Cars came in and out, drivers honked, security guards backed others, maids hurried around in their neat uniforms. But no one ever paid attention to the frail woman sitting just outside the gate until today. Tunde, the young security guard, walked towards her, a plastic bag in his hand. He squatted beside her and placed the bag on the ground. Take, he said. I bought small akara for you. The old woman turned to him, her lips stretching into a grateful smile. God bless you, my son. Tunde shrugged. You can't sit down every day like this without food. He glanced at the mansion behind him before lowering his voice. Mama, why are you still here? Chief Odogu will never notice you. Even if he does, you think he will care? The old woman picked up the bag of aura and took a small bite. She chewed slowly, souring the taste before speaking. He will care, she said quietly. He does not know yet. But when he finds out, he will care. Tuned is what you have been saying for the past 3 years, Mama. This man does not even know you exist. The old woman only smiled, not far away. Emeka, another security guard, watched him. His face was hard. His eyes narrowed, and Tundi walked back to his post. Esha called him aside. You better stop talking to that old woman. She is trouble. Tund frowned. Why would you say that? She's a harmless old woman. Leaned in closer. You don't understand. Madame Ununis does not want Chief Odogu to hear anything about that woman. She warned us never to allow her near the gate. If she catches you giving her food, you can lose your job. Tun's eyes widened. Why would Madame Ununis say should not know about the woman? Acha looked around as if making sure no one else was listening. Then he whispered, I don't know, but I feel there is something she's hiding. Something about that woman. Tund felt a chill run down his spine. That evening, as the sun began to set, a black SUV pulled up in front of the mansion. The gate opened and Chief Odogu stepped out of the house, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit. His phone was pressed to his ear and his voice was firm as he spoke. I want that deal closed before the end of the week. He said, no excuses. He walked down the SUV, his mind focused on business. He didn't see the old woman. He never did. But today something was different. As the car started to pull away, the old woman stood up slowly. She watched him with eyes full of something deep, something that had been buried for decades. And then, for the first time in 3 years, she took a step closer to the gate. The guard stiffened. Moved towards her. You can't cross here, he warned. The old woman ignored him. She raised her hand slightly as if trying to reach out. The SUV sped past her. For a brief second, Chief Odog turned his head. His eyes flickered towards the old woman outside the gate. He frowned slightly, something about her catching his attention. But then the car was gone. The old woman let her hand fall back to her side. She had waited 3 years, and now for the first time he had looked in her direction. It was only a second, but it was enough. For 3 years she had been invisible to the man behind the gate. But today, even if it was just for a second, Chief Odogu had looked in her direction. It wasn't much, but it was a crack in the wall. She was patient. She had waited 3 years. She could wait a little longer. Inside the mansion, Chief Odogu sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His mind was occupied with business matters. Yet something small and insignificant kept tugging at his thoughts. That old woman, for some reason, the brief glimpse of her outside the gate lingered in his mind. There was nothing remarkable about her, just another beggar sitting where she had no business sitting. And yet, why did she look so familiar? With a sigh, he pushed the thought away. He had more important things to worry about. Later that evening, as Chief Odogu was leaving for a high-profile business meeting, he found himself looking towards the gate again. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was habit, or maybe it was that strange feeling he had the night before. And then for the second time in 3 years, his eyes met hers. She was already watching him. Chief Odogo's brows furrowed. Something about her gaze unsettled him. It wasn't the desperate, pleading look of a beggar. It was knowing as if she knew something about him that he did not. He quickly looked away and got into his car. But as the car sped off, his fingers tapped against his knee in irritation. Why did he feel as though that old woman was waiting for him specifically? That night, for the first time in a long while, Chief Odogo found sleep difficult to come by. Chief Odogo was not himself. The following morning he sat at the breakfast table, barely touching his meal. His mind was restless, occupied by thought he did not understand. That old woman, why was she always outside his gate? Why did she look at him like that? "Shukuri, what is wrong with you?" Madame Eunice asked, sipping her tea. She was seated across from him, her expression calm but observant. Chief Odogu sighed, rubbing his temple. "It is nothing, Mom." Madame Eunice's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then why do you look disturbed?" He hesitated before finally speaking. "There is an old woman that sits outside our gates every day. I have never paid attention to her before, but recently I noticed her, and I don't know why, but something about her unsettles me." A brief flicker of panic flashed in Madame Eunice's eyes, but it disappeared quickly that Chief Odogu almost missed it. She placed her teacup down carefully. "There are beggars everywhere, my son," she said smoothly. "You shouldn't concern yourself with such things." Chief Odogu leaned back in his chair. "She's not like the others, Mom. She doesn't beg. She just sits there and watches." Madame Eunice's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, but her voice remained steady. "She's probably mad. Just ignore her." Chief Odogu studied his mother's face. He had spent his entire life learning to read people. Body language, micro-expressions, hidden fears. It was what made him a good businessman, and right now he could tell that his mother was lying. But why? Before he could press further, the head maid entered the dining room. "Chief, your car is ready." Chief Odogo pushed his thoughts aside and stood up. He had a busy day ahead. But as he walked out of the house and towards his waiting car, he made a decision. Today he would take a closer look at that woman. The old woman, as always, was seated outside, her posture calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Chief Odogu stepped closer, studying her, the wrinkles on her face, the graying hair, the quiet but intense look in her eyes. And then for the first time he spoke to her. "Who are you?" The air seemed to steal. The old woman lifted her head, and for a brief moment something flickered in her eyes. A mix of emotions, sadness, hope, and something deeper. Chief Odogen couldn't take his eyes off her. "I asked you a question." "Who are you?" The old woman opened her mouth to speak, but before she could utter another word, her voice called out from behind. "Chuki." He turned to see Madame Eunice whoring towards him, her face carefully composed, but there was something in her eyes that betrayed her urgency. "You are late for your meeting," she said quickly, taking his arm. "Come, we must go." Chief Odogu hesitated, his gaze flickering between his mother and the old woman. Something was wrong here, but Madame Eunice's grip tightened onto his arm. "Let go," she said more firmly this time. After a long pause, he finally turned away. Without another word, he got into his car and the gates closed behind him. The old woman sat still, watching. She had come close today, very close, but she was patient. She had waited 3 years. She could wait a little longer. For the first time in 3 years, Chief O'Dog had looked at her, spoken to her. She had seen the confusion in his eyes. Inside the mansion, Madame Unounis pierced restlessly in her bedroom. Her fingers trembled as she held a glass of water. But it wasn't thirst that made her reach for it. It was fear. For years she had ensured the secret remained buried. For years she had controlled everything. But today it almost slipped. That woman she had dared to speak. Madame Unounis greeted her feet. She needed to act fast. She set the glass down and picked up her phone. The call was answered after 2 rings. "She is still outside," Madame Unounis said, her voice sharp. "I want her gone tonight." Then a low, deep voice responded, "Consider it done." Madame Unounis ended the call and exhaled shakily. She had done too much, sacrificed too much to let this old woman ruin everything. No, she would not allow it. Chief Odogo sat in his office tapping a pen against the glass table. His meeting had ended over an hour ago, but his mind was still occupied. The old woman, something about her unsettled him. His fingers tightened around the pen. Something didn't feel right. He had spent his life making smart decisions, trusting facts, never allowing emotions to cloud his judgment, and yet his instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong. With a sigh, he leaned back in his chair and reached for his phone. He dialed a number. The young security guard's voice came through immediately. "Yes, I want you to watch that old woman. Don't touch her, don't send her away. Just watch her. And if anything happens to her, anything at all, I want to know immediately." "Yes," Tunde answered. Chief Odong ended the call and rubbed his temples. He didn't know why he was doing this, but he had learned a long time ago that when his gut told him something was wrong, it usually was, and this time it was screaming. That night the old woman sat in the darkness, staring at the gate, waiting. She did not know that danger was coming. She did not know that Madame Unounis had made a call. She only knew one thing. She had waited for too long, and soon the truth will finally be revealed. The street was silent except for the distant hum of passing cars. The old woman remained seated, her tired eyes fixed on the gate, waiting. Then she heard it, a footstep, soft, careful. She did not turn immediately, but her heart began to beat fast. Another step. This time she turned her head slightly and saw them. 2 men dressed in dark clothing, moving towards her with quiet precision. Something inside her warned her. This is not normal. She gripped the edges of her wrapper and slowly pushed herself up. Her joints screamed in protest, but she ignored them. One of the men spoke. "Mama, it's late. You shouldn't be sitting out here alone." She said nothing. The other man stepped towards her. "Come, let's take you somewhere safe." A cold feeling settled in her stomach. She had lived too long, seen too much. She knew the sense of danger, and right now it was thick in the air. She took a step back. "Leave me alone," the first man sighed. "Old woman, don't make this hard." They moved closer, and then a sudden voice shattered the silence. "Hey, what's going on there?" The 2 men froze. The old woman turned, her eyes widening as she saw a figure emerging from the shadows. Tunde, the young security guard, had been watching from a distance, just as Chief Odogo had instructed. He had seen the 2 men approached and sensed the unease in the air. Now he stepped forward. I said, "What is going on here?" The 2 men exchanged a glance. Then, without a word, they turned and melted into the night. Tude rushed to the old woman. "Mama, are you okay?" She nodded, her body still trembling. Tunde looked in the direction the men had disappeared. He knew what this was. Someone wanted this woman gone, and now he had a feeling he knew exactly who. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Ga, it is me," he said, the moment Chief Odogo answered. You told me to watch the old woman. I think somebody just tried to kill her." A heavy silence. Then Chief Odogo's voice, sharp and cold, "Bring her inside." "Mama, we need to go inside now," Twend said. The old woman hesitated. She had waited 3 years for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. "Inside," she whispered. "Yes," Tund nodded firmly. Auga said, "I should bring you inside." For a moment her eyes filled with uncertainty. Then with a slow breath, she gave a small nod. Tund led her towards the towering gate. He knocked twice and the smaller entrance door opened. The other security guards looked at him in confusion. Tund ignored their questioning looks. He only had one mission: to get this old woman to safety. Inside the mansion, Chief Chuki Odogo stood near the grand staircase, his thought racing. Tund's words had sent a strange chill down his spine. "I think someone just tried to kill her. Why? Why would someone want an old beggar dead? It made no sense unless there was something more to this woman." A sound at the door made him turn. Tund stepped in first, guiding the old woman inside, and there she was. The woman he had only glanced at for 3 years, the woman whose presence had always been an annoyance, a mystery, an unanswered question. Now she stood in his home. For the first time, Chief Odogo looked at her properly. She was frail, her hands were calloused, her wrapper old and faded, but her eyes— there was something familiar about them, something unsettling. He stepped forward slowly. "Who are you?" The old woman swallowed hard. Her voice came out in a whisper. I am." She stopped. "Not yet. Not like this." She lowered her head. "I am just a poor woman." Odogu's eyes narrowed. The old woman lifted her head again. "I have waited so long just to see you, just to speak to you." His chest tightened before he could respond. Footsteps echoed from the staircase. Madame Unis. Her expensive gown swayed as she descended, her face a mask of surprise. But Chief Odogo saw something beneath it, something cold, something calculating. She stopped at the foot of the stairs and turned to Tundi. "What is she doing here?" Tundi hesitated, glancing at Chief Odogu. Odog's voice was firm. "I asked him to bring her in." Madame Uni's fingers curled at her side, but her face remained calm. She turned to the old woman. "Mama, you should not be here. You must be tired. Let me arrange for you to be taken somewhere comfortable." The old woman looked directly at her, and something passed between them. Something dangerous, something unspoken. "I am comfortable here," the old woman said, quietly. Chief Odogo frowned. He could feel it now. The tension in the room, the way the old woman and Madame Ununis looked at each other. Something was wrong, something was hidden, and for the first time in his life he wanted to know the truth. The room was silent. Madame Ununis was the first to break the silence. "This is madness." Her voice was smooth, but there was an edge of frustration in it. "Chuki, you don't know this woman. She's just a beggar who has been sitting outside our gates for years. Why are you letting her into our home?" The old woman didn't flinch. Her gaze remained locked on Madame Ununise. Chief Odoko folded his arm. "And why does that bother you so much?" Madame Ununise stiffened. "Bother me?" She let out a false laugh. "Chuki, I am simply worried about you. Do you know how many dangerous people disguise themselves as beggars? What if she's a fraudster? What if she's here to cause trouble?" The old woman finally spoke, her voice steady. "I am not here to cause trouble. I only want to speak." Chief Odogo's eyes darkened with suspicion. "Then speak." The old woman opened her mouth, then hesitated. She glanced at Madame Ununis before looking back at Chief Odogo. "Not here," she said softly. "Not in front of her." Madame Ununis' face twisted. "Excuse me. You come into my home and now you are saying I can't be here." The old woman didn't respond. She simply waited. Chief Odogo studied her for a long moment. Then, without taking his eyes off her, he said, Mom, please leave us. A flicker of panic crossed Madame Eunice's face, but she quickly masked it. Chuki, you can't be serious. I am. His voice was firm, unyielding. Please, Mom, leave. For the first time in years, Madame Eunice felt a cold dread creeping into her bones. This was bad. Very bad. She forced a smell. All right, I will leave, but I will be close by if you need me. She turned and walked out. Inside the room, Chief Odogu gestured towards a chair. Sit. The old woman obeyed. He sat across from her, studying her features, the wrinkles, the fray hands, the tired eyes. And yet something in those eyes felt unsettling. Familiar. Talk, he ordered. The old woman took a deep breath. I have watched you for a long time. His fist clenched. Who are you? The old woman exhaled. I am the woman who carried your truth for over 40 years. A strange coldness spread through Chief Odogo's chest. My truth? Yes. The old woman leaned forward slightly. The truth about who you really are. Chief Odogo's heartbeat quickened. She sighed, rubbing her hands together. I do not know how much you are prepared to hear, but you must understand this is a story of pain, of theft, of a truth that was buried for decades. Chief Odogu leaned forward, his pulse pounding. Tell me everything. The old woman inhaled deeply. Then, in a voice filled with sorrow, she said, It all began in a house not too different from this one 42 years ago. I was young when I came to work as a maid in a wealthy home. I had no parents, no siblings, just myself and my dreams of a better life. She paused, her eyes distant. The house belonged to a powerful man and his wife. They were rich, respected, but their marriage was troubled. The wife was barren. The old woman continued, her voice dropping lower. She had prayed, fasted, visited doctors, and even native doctors, but nothing changed. No child came. Chief Odogo's throat tightened. Something inside him whispered that she wasn't just speaking of any couple. She was speaking of someone he knew. The old woman clenched her hands together. The husband of this woman was not patient. He wanted a child, and he was ready to do anything to have one. Her voice became unsteady. One night he came into my room. I was only a maid, she continued. I had no power, no voice. He took what he wanted from me, and I had no choice but to endure. There was silence, thick, heavy silence. Chief Odogu's hand gripped the armrest of his chair. She wasn't just telling him any story, she was telling him her story, and it was a story of betrayal and suffering. I fell pregnant, the old woman whispered. I did not plan for it. I did not want it. But inside me, life was growing. The wife, my madame, found out. Chief Odogo's pulse quickened. She was devastated at first, but then she saw an opportunity. She had no child and had one growing inside me. So she made a decision. What decision? He asked. The old woman looked him straight in the eyes. She took my child. She waited until I gave birth, then took my baby away from me. She told the world that it was hers. She forced me out of the house and erased my existence. Her lips trembled. She had everything, wealth, power, and now my child. But I had nothing. Chief Odog's heart pounded violently in his chest, a child stolen from his mother, a lie to the world. A boy raised in a mansion, believing he was born into wealth. He felt dizzy. His mind struggled to reject the thoughts forming in his head, but the pieces were clicking together too perfectly. The old woman stared at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. She saw it. She saw the moment the truth hit him. Chief Odogo finally spoke. Who? Who was the child? The old woman inhaled sharply. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You. Chief Odogo's world stopped. The word echoed in his mind like a hammer striking an iron. You. He could hear his own heartbeats pounding in his ears. He stared at the old woman. waiting, praying for her to take it back. But she didn't. She simply watched him, her eyes full of emotions. No, 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 Chief Odago whispered, shaking his head. That's impossible. The old woman exhaled shakily. It is the truth. Number. His voice was firmer now. My mother. My mother is Madame Ununis. She raised me. She raised you, but she did not birth you. I gave birth to you. Odoko got up from his chair, his hands trembling. It felt like though the ground beneath him was collapsing. You expect me to believe this? He muttered. That my entire life, my childhood, my mother, that all this was a lie. The old woman swallowed. I never wanted you to find out this way. Chief Odogu turned back sharply. His eyes burned with anger, confusion, and something else. Fear. Who are you? He demanded. And what do you want from me? The old woman's lips trembled. I am your mother, Chuki. The way he said his name, his real name, sent a strange chill down his spine. I gave birth to you, she continued. I carried you in my womb for 9 months. I felt your first kick. I held you when you were born. Her voice broke. And then I lost you. Chief Audigen clenched his fist. No, he said again. I was born into wealth. I was raised in this mansion. My father, your father, was the one who raped me. The old woman shouted back. The words stabbed through him. He staggered back a little. She continued. He was desperate for a child, and I was an easy target. When I fell pregnant, his wife did not throw me out immediately. She waited. She planned, and when I gave birth to you, she took you from me and then forced me out of the house, telling me I was nothing. Chief Odogu felt dizzy. Lies, lies, lies. He wanted to call her a liar. He wanted to scream, but something deep inside of him, something he didn't want to acknowledge, believed her. Why now? He said, Why come after all these years? The old woman let out a shaky breath. I came years ago, she said softly. But I was nothing to you then, just a beggar outside your gate, just an old woman you never noticed. A tear slid down her cheek, but I never stopped waiting because I knew that one day you would hear me. Chief Odog squeezed his eyes shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Chief Odogu paced the room like a trapped animal. His heart was racing. His mind was in chaos. Everything he had known, everything he had believed had just shattered. He turned sharply to the woman, his breath unsteady. Do you have proof? His voice was cold, distant, but inside he was anything but calm. The old woman met his gaze, pain flickering in her tired eyes. I have no documents, no pictures. They erased me from your life. Chief Odogon clenched his fist. Then how do I believe you? She sighed, reaching for something inside her tattered wrapper. Slowly she pulled out a small, worn-out piece of cloth, a baby's cloth, faded, old, but embroidered with something. Chief Odogu stepped closer. He squinted at the writing Chigosie. His body stiffened. It was his name, his real name, not the name Madame Ununis had given him, not the name he had carried for decades as the son of a millionaire. No, this was his first name before everything was taken. His throat tightened, his hands trembled as he reached for the cloth, but he pulled back before touching it. No, he whispered. This proves nothing. It's just a name, a coincidence. The old woman swallowed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Look inside, my son. Have you never felt that something was missing, that something was wrong? Chief Audigo's jaw tightened. Something inside him had always felt off. His mother, Madame Ununis, had always been overprotective, almost like she was afraid of losing him, afraid of the truth coming out. He remembered his childhood, the way she never let him get too close to anyone outside their family, the way she always panics when he asks questions about his birth. Had she been hiding something all along? He turned to the old woman. Tell me one thing, he said. Did you ever try to take me back? A tear finally escaped her eyes. "I tried," she whispered. "I begged. I fought. But they had money, they had power, and I was just a poor girl thrown away like trash." Her lips trembled. "They told me if I ever tried to claim you, they would destroy me. So I waited. I waited for you to find me." Chief Odogu took a deep breath. If what she was saying was true, then he was a stolen child, a lie, dressed up in riches and comfort. He clenched his fist. His so-called mother, Madame Ununis, owed him the truth, and he was going to get it tonight. Chief Odoku stood in front of his mother's bedroom door, his heart pounding. Or was she even his mother? His fist clenched at his side. He has spent his entire life loving, respecting, and protecting Madame Ununis. But now doubt crawled inside him like a disease, eating away at everything he thought he knew. Was she truly the woman who had given him life, or was she the one who had stolen it? He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Madame Muniz was seated at the edge of her large bed, draped in her signature silk robe. She was sipping tea calmly as always until she saw his face. Her hands froze around the teacup. Something in his expression made her go still. "Odogu," she said carefully. "What is it?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Who am I?" She blinked. "What?" I said. "Who am I?" Madame Yuni's lips parted slightly, confusion in her eyes. "Odogu, what kind of question is that?" Chief Odogu stepped forward. "That old woman in there, she told me a story about a young maid who was raped by her boss, about a baby that was taken from her, about a rich woman who was barren and needed a child to call her own." Madame Ununis was silent. The silence stretched between them for a while, and then slowly she placed the cup on the bedside table. She raised her eyes to meet his, and what he saw shook him to his call. There was no surprise, no confusion, just resignation. Chief Odogo's breath came out shakily. "Tell me she's lying," he whispered. "Tell me she's just some mad woman who made up these stories to get my attention." "I can't," she said. The room tilted. Chief Odogo stumbled back, his head spinning. He felt the walls were closing in on him, like the floor was about to swallow him whole. She wasn't lying. The old woman wasn't lying. Everything she had told him, the pain, the betrayal, the theft of his own existence was true. His entire life had been a lie. "I did what I had to do," she said quietly. "What you had to do?" His voice cracked with anger. "You stole me from my mother. She was a maid." Madame Muniz snapped suddenly, her voice sharp. "She had nothing. What kind of life would she have given to you? Poverty, suffering. Is that what you wanted?" She Odog fled. Madame Muniz took a deep breath, lowering her voice. "You are who you are today because of me, because of us." She clasped her hands together. "Yes, I was wrong. Yes, we lied. But tell me, Odugo, if you could go back, would you really choose to be the son of a poor maid over the life you have now?" He stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. She had just admitted it everything, and she wasn't even begging for forgiveness. She was justifying it. Chief Odogu turned away. He needed to breathe. He needed to think. And one thing was clear. The woman who raised him, the woman he had loved and honored, was not his mother. She was his kidnapper. Chief Odogo stomped out of Madame Uniz's bedroom. His hands were shaking. He had spent 42 years living a lie. The woman he called mother was a thief, a liar, a woman who had stolen him from his real mother and raised him as her own. He staggered down the hallway, his mind spinning. He needed air. He needed to get out of the house. As he reached the grand staircase, he heard hurried footstep behind him. Odogu, please wait. Odogu, please wait." That was Madame Yuni's voice. She was desperate now. He clenched his jaw and kept walking. She ran after him, grabbing his arm at the bottom of the stairs. "Please, my son." He ripped his arm away from her grasps. "I'm not your son," he said, his voice hard. She froze. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. I loved you. You stole me," Chief Odogu caught in, his voice dangerously low, his fist clenched at his side. "You stole me from my real mother and erase her from my life." Madame Ununis shook her head frantically. "I did it to give you a better life. I did it because I loved you." Chief Odogu let out a bitter laugh. "Loved me." He turned to her fully now, his eyes burning. "If you really loved me, you would have told me the truth. You would have let me decide for myself. Instead, you built my entire life on a lie." She dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she claps her hands together. "Odogu, please, please don't do this. Don't throw me away." He swallowed her. This was the woman who raised him. No matter what she had done, he couldn't erase that. But at the same time, he couldn't forget what she had done. He couldn't pretend it didn't matter. He looked down at her, his heart heavy. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the door. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Outside, the night air was cold against his skin. But it wasn't just the cold that made him shiver. It was the weight of the truth pressing down on him. For 3 years, the old woman had waited at the gate. His real mother, his heart ached. How much had she suffered? How much had she endured? The pain, the loss, the agony of watching him grow up from afar, knowing he didn't even know her. All those times he had dismissed her as a mad beggar. All those days he had walked past her without a second glance. All those nights she had probably cried herself to sleep, wondering if he would ever recognize her. He felt sick, sick with regret, sick with shame. He ran back to his home, back to where he left the old woman. And for the first time in 42 years, he wrapped his arm around the woman who had given him life. She broke down. She collapsed into his arms, crying uncontrollably. Chief Odogu cried too. For the first time in 42 years, she had her son in her arms. And for the first time in his life, Chief Odogu felt whole. The world around them became a blow. Nothing else mattered. Only this moment. Only her. If you enjoyed the story, then I am certain that you will enjoy the next story showing on the screen right now. Please click on the thumbnail and watch the next story. Please support me by liking this video, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to my channel. See you in my next story. Bye.